To start off reading today, I want to tell you a little story about my older brother. If you're wondering why I'm crying in that picture, it's because he is pulling my hair. Like many siblings, he did tend to pick on me, but that's not what I want to talk about today. Another behavior that he had was that he did tend to complain a lot. So I would say he had the trait of being a bit whiny. And since I knew that about him, when a situation would come up that I could tell wasn't going his way, I could predict that he was probably going to complain a lot. Similarly, when we know a lot about characters in a story or in a series, we can use what we know about how their character behaves most of the time or their character traits to predict what they are going to do next in the story. And we are going to practice that with Frog and Toad. Before we read another story, I do want to mention that my brother has outgrown that trait. He is not as whiny of a person now. So that is something to remember about characters too, that they can change. It's just, it might take some time, or it might take a situation where they learn an important lesson or moral to cause them to change. It's not like feelings that we've said those change like real quick. It might take some time and some big learning moment for them to change their traits. Before we read another Frog and Toad story, let's quickly remind ourselves of some of the character traits we've already noticed in them. For Frog, we've noticed that he is usually pretty friendly, he is responsible, he is helpful. Toad seems to get himself in a lot of situations where Frog is the one coming and kind of saving him. Frog is also pretty optimistic, he has a positive attitude about things. While Toad, we've seen, can be a little bit lazy, he likes to stay in bed. He can be, irresponsible, like in Tomorrow when he kept putting off his work. He can be impatient, like in The Lost Button. He wanted to find that button right away, and that specific button, so we said he's a little bit picky. And like my brother, we said he can be a little bit whiny. So when we're reading this new story, we're going to pause and we're going to make some predictions about what we think these characters are going to do next based on these character traits we already know about them. This story is called The Letter. Toad was sitting on his front porch. Frog came along and said, "What is the matter, Toad? You are looking sad." "Yes," said Toad, "this is my sad time of day. It is the time when I wait for the mail to come. It always makes me very unhappy." "Why is that?" asked Frog. "Because I never get any mail," said Toad. "Not ever?" asked Frog. "No, never," said Toad. "No one has ever sent me a letter. Every day my mailbox is empty. That is why waiting for the mail is a sad time for me." Frog and Toad sat on the porch, feeling sad together. So we're going to stop right here since we've already figured out what the problem in the story is. It seems to be Toad is sad that he never gets any letters. And he's already doing a little bit of that whining where he's just like, "I never get a letter." So now we're going to try and predict what these characters might do next. So knowing Frog and knowing that he is a pretty helpful and friendly character, my prediction is that he is going to try and do something to make Toad feel better. And considering the problem is Toad hasn't ever got a letter, I think the easiest way Frog might try to fix this problem is by writing him a letter. And for Toad, I'm thinking, I don't know, before the problem gets solved, I feel like there's going to be a little bit more whining involved and a little bit more being down. Maybe the opposite of being optimistic, which is being pessimistic. That word pessimistic means you're being like really negative. And I can see before the problem getting solved, Toad continuing to be really pessimistic and being like, "Oh, poor me, I never get any letters." So these are my predictions. We can continue reading and see what happens. Then Frog said, "I have to go home now, Toad. There's something that I must do." Frog hurried home. He found a pencil and a piece of paper. He wrote on the paper. He put the paper in an envelope. On the envelope, he wrote, "A letter for Toad." Yes! I knew it! I knew it! Frog was going to try and solve that problem. Frog ran out of the house. He saw a snail that he knew. "Snail," said Frog, "please take this letter to Toad's house and put it in his mailbox." "Sure," said the snail, right away. So let's keep reading and see if our prediction about Toad was also right. Then Frog ran back to Toad's house. Toad was in bed taking a nap. Toad, said Frog, I think you should get up and wait for the mail some more. No, said Toad, I am tired of waiting for the mail. Frog looked out of the window at Toad's mailbox. The snail was not there yet. Toad, said Frog, you never know when someone may send you a letter. No, no, said Toad. I do not think anyone will ever send me a letter. Frog looked out of the window. The snail was not there yet. But Toad, said Frog, someone may send you a letter today. Don't be silly, said Toad. No one has ever sent me a letter before, and no one will send me a letter today. Frog looked out of the window. The snail was still not there. Frog, why do you keep looking out of the window? Asked Toad. Because now I'm waiting for the mail, said Frog. There will not be any, said Toad. Oh, yes, there will, said Frog, because I have sent you a letter. You have? Said Toad. What did you write in the letter? Frog said, I wrote, Dear Toad, I am glad that you are my best friend. Aw, your best friend, Frog. Oh, said Toad, that makes a very good letter. Then Frog and Toad went out onto the front porch to wait for the mail. They sat there feeling happy together. Frog and Toad waited a long time. Remember, it was a snail. 4 days later, the snail got to Toad's house and gave him the letter from Frog. Toad was very pleased to have it. So our predictions were right. What we did is we took their character traits and used it to predict what Frog and Toad were going to do next in the story. And you're going to do this yourselves for another story.